Think gadget reviews, news, and all about it.
Oppo F1 Plus review. The Oppo F1 Plus is a bit of an eye-opener. For just £300 you get a 5.5-in, all-metal phone with a design the iPhone 6s Plus follow-up could take a few tips from. There are a few quirks to put up with and some components that aren't truly top-end, but if you want a phone that feels like £500 and costs £300, you can't do much better. Look familiar? Let's get this one out of the way early. Yes, I know the Oppo F1 Plus looks like the iPhone 6s Plus. The color, the lines, the 5.5-in screen and curves are all pretty familiar, with just a slightly different character to them. Apple 1, Oppo 0? Not quite. This design is actually more advanced than the iPhone 6s Plus in some ways. Apple's Big Un is a lovely phone, but it isn't half, well, big. The Oppo F1 Plus slims down the screen surround and the bulk of the phone, avoiding the core blimey, no more skinny jeans, eh? Effect that comes with buying a 6s Plus. Alt-old, the F1 Plus is more than 6mm shorter, 3.5mm narrower and 0.7mm thinner than Apple's phablet. Before you tell me I'm making a point of nothing, one of the commonest mobile complaints I've heard over the last couple of years has been people moaning that while they really like the iPhone Pluses, they find them just a bit too big. The Oppo neatly sidesteps that complaint. There's very little to dislike about the Oppo F1 Plus design unless you really must have originality. It looks great, feels fantastic and really isn't too big considering the screen size. Nerd culture. Oppo hasn't suddenly ditched its original geeky fanbase to get these lines, either. For instance, the F1 Plus still has a dual SIM slot, the second of which can double as a memory card slot. I'm not sure I'd ever even need to use a memory card, though, because the phone has a fantastic 64GB of storage too. Samsung would probably still offer you 16GB at this price. Thinking Oppo might have just stuffed the F1 Plus with the cheapest memory it could find, I revved its engine a bit to see how fast it goes. It reads at 164 megabytes per second and writes at 138 megabytes per second. For those who don't sit around seeing how fast their USB stick are, and if that's you, you're really missing out. This is pretty nippy, and comparable with some top-end phones. Real cheap phone storage is as slow as a tenth of this. The Oppo F1 Plus is starting to sound like a sweet deal, and we've not finished yet. It also has a fingerprint scanner. Like the Galaxy S7, it sits on a clickable home button down below the screen. You need to actually click the button to unlock the phone from sleep, but it's virtually instant in doing so. The days of crummy scanners truly are over. Unlike its smaller, cheaper brother the Oppo F1, the F1 Plus has tiny light-up soft keys too. Their design is spot on, they are invisible when not lit up, subtle when they are. For pure look and feel, this phone can sidle up to any in the world. And even if you do call it an iPhone 6s Plus ripoff, you'd have to admit it's a nice one. A brute of an OLED. The first point at which you notice the tiniest hint of a crack in the Oppo F1 Plus's glossy £600-alike coating is its screen. It's big, it's bold and it's sharp, but the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge's is better, no great surprise. On the good side, the Oppo F1 Plus has a 5.5-in 1920 by 1080 AMOLED screen. And it's mostly lovely to look at. I could watch films and play games on this thing all day long. Well, on a long flight at least. One obvious benefit of using an OLED screen rather than an LCD one is that it still looks amazing in dark rooms, where LCDs can end up looking a little grayed out. For those who indulge in a bit of pre-sleep Instagram crawling or late-night Netflix binges, the F1 Plus even has an eye protection mode. This is similar to Night Shift in iOS, itself far from the first to do this, cutting out a lot of the blue light wavelengths that can disrupt your sleepy bye-byes pattern. It's not automatic in the Oppo, but can be accessed from the drop-down menu pretty quickly. Loads of people are going to ignore the feature altogether, but I like the manual approach as eye protection does make the Oppo F1 Plus screen look a bit orangey. A bit like when you soak a piece of paper in tea to make it look old. So why is the Galaxy S7 Edge screen better? First, it's sharper. Close up you can notice the tiniest hint of fizz on this 401p display. Should you worry about that? No, it's still very sharp. Second, the colors lean towards a more saturated style, reds looking a lot deeper than they do on an iPhone 6s. Sat next to a Galaxy S7, colors are actually pretty similar in the S7's adaptive mode, but then the Samsung also offers other modes that make the tones chill out a bit. The Oppo F1 Plus doesn't. Only screen snobs should worry about this, and turbocharging color seems to be the in thing at the moment anyway. The F1 Plus also doesn't offer the turbo brightest of the best Samsungs. I dug out a screen measuring gadget to see exactly how bright these displays go, then put the Plus and the Galaxy S7 next to an 1800 lumen light to roughly simulate a daytime stroll out on the surface of the sun. Where the Oppo F1 Plus can go to 348 CD/m brightness, the S7 goes up to 470 CD/m. The Oppo will be fine out on a sunny day, but the top Samsungs will be better. Are these tests fair when the equivalent Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge costs twice the price? Not exactly, but when this phone seems to promise all the hardware at 50% of the price, you need to know what you're getting. Still, so far I'm impressed. None of these little screen bits need put you off. This is still a top quality display. Color me ambivalent. Last time I reviewed an Oppo phone, the plain F1, I had a few complaints about the ColorOS software used on top of Android. Here we get a new version, though, 3.0. It sorts out a lot of the dated visuals of the old v2.1, and no longer feels a bit labored with its screen animations. ColorOS feels right in an important sense, it's fast. Using it side by side with the S7, it also makes TouchWiz look complicated, even though Samsung has spent the last 2 years pruning back some of its software extras. What many of you might not like is that the Android apps menu has vanished. So while your apps get put on a home screen, there's no automatic arranging. I tend to barely touch my home screens, so like to rely on the alphabetic apps menu found on most Android phones to avoid the handset becoming a digital thrift shop. But I can't do that here. ColorOS 3.0 also uses a comically bad lock screen style by default, displaying a random picture from a selection whenever you turn the F1 Plus on. You might get a picture of a sofa, followed by a half-naked model, followed by BoJack Horseman. As much as we love BoJack, it's all faintly embarrassing. Final complaint, the Oppo F1 Plus also uses the old Android 5.1 OS at its heart rather than Android 6.0. When ColorOS is so different anyway, it doesn't necessarily matter as much as you might expect. The major missing part is Google Now on tap, which scans the page for terms the Android Digital Butler can fetch you information about. 8 core norms. Still, I find general performance to be on par with the more expensive phones, even though the Oppo F1 Plus has a deceptively humble CPU. It uses the MediaTek P10, not a processor we see around much. While the P10's 8 cores make it sound like a beast, the fact remains that they're all lower-power Cortex-A53 cores. Really, it's a mid-range processor rather than a true high-end one, comparable with the Snapdragon 616 used in the Oppo F1. Accordingly, its Geekbench 3 score of 3,345 is the least you'd expect for this sort of cache in 2015, but then again, does it matter? The phone feels fast and, perhaps most important, the Mali T860 CPU has the chops to let you max out graphics in games without any major knock-on effects in frame rate. While the CPU brain has similar power to Oppo's own Snapdragon-powered 170-pound F1, the GPU here is significantly better. 3D Mark's Unlimited test proves it. The F1 scores 8,992, the F1 Plus 11,079. I'd call this sort of spec enough for 1080p, especially when it's matched with fast storage and a massive 4GB RAM. Want proof? It runs high-end 3D flying game Storm Raiders at ultra-high graphics settings at totally playable speeds.